Testing. Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. It is 5:33 p.m. on Monday, March 9th, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Start school committee member introductions with Counselor Harriman.
Scott Harriman, City Council Representative to the School Committee.
Donna Gallant, Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Linnea Hawkins, Ward 5.
Julia Harper, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Ames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Luke Jensen at large.
Phoenix McLaughlin, Ward 1.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
So next is the consent agenda with the minutes and personnel. Are there any items that members would like set aside? Okay, seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. Next is public input. So members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Speakers must adhere to our public comment policy, BEDH, which is available in the back of the room or on the LPS website. These meetings exist to conduct school committee business. The purpose of public comment is to share thoughts on school and educational matters. Committee members and school staff will not reply during this time. Comments must be directed to the chair and be civil. By law, comments may not pertain to specific staff or students. Comments about individuals must be directed privately to the appropriate LPS staff. Student privacy must be maintained. The public comment period is 30 minutes unless extended due to unusual circumstances. Priority goes to Lewiston residents and parents, students, or employees of LPS. Before starting, please state your name, town or city of residence, and affiliation to LPS. So is there any public comment on non-agenda items?
Good evening. My name is David Rackmills, and I'm a concerned resident and taxpayer in Ward 1. I wanted to start by noting that February was Black History Month. I had planned a PSA on the subject for the February 23rd meeting, but it wound up getting canceled due to the snowstorm. I recently reread Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s A Letter from Birmingham Jail, which I found relevant to our current time and place. The text is in the public domain now, and I would encourage the whole community and especially our school committee members to refamiliarize themselves with the content. Last week, I spoke about the issue of enrolling students across district boundaries and the absence of any useful information that would inform the public how that works. Thank you, Mr. Langlis, for following up with an email the next day asking for more detail about my concerns and suggested remedies. I started working on a reply, but I've had a busy week and I don't have a large staff to help me. As with so many other issues regarding the school, the main concern is that nobody outside the school administration seems to have a clue what is actually going on. I want to thank Member Harper for asking this subject be added to a future meeting agenda. But as important as the subject is, please don't rush to do that. Absent a thorough public presentation of the pattern and practice involved, the discussion would be pointless and fruitless. As part of my reply to the superintendent, I was preparing some very specific questions about the practice to which I hope I could get written replies in a reasonable time frame based on the documentation that LPS must be keeping for each enrolled student and any request to enroll outside of district boundaries. I will give some examples later as time allows. This information should be available to committee members and the general public at least a week ahead of the scheduled discussion, so the members can prepare appropriate questions to inform any changes in policy or practice. I hope there would be consensus that something should change. At a minimum, the policy needs to be updated to reflect current practice. That is hard to do when the current practice exists inside the black box that is the LPS administration. So some examples of questions I would like to have answered. 1, can an out-of-district enrollment occur without a documented request? 2, if the answer to 1 is yes, please explain the circumstances, their frequency, if known, and how they are documented and corrected if they are a mistake and are discovered after the fact. 3, how are requests to enroll a student across district lines categorized? 4, for the current school year, what are the numbers of requests for each category at each grade level within the system? 5, who is authorized to make a request for each category? 6, can a single request cover more than one student, or does there need to be a separate request for each student? All right, there's more.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment on non-agenda items? Go right ahead.
It's on. Okay, thank you. Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Stephanie Poulin, and I am a licensed clinical social worker serving students at Montello Elementary, and I have been there in that capacity for 13 years. I'm here tonight because I understand that general education social work positions may be considered for elimination in next year's budget. I want to be transparent that my own position is not currently the one at risk. I'm speaking because I believe this decision could have significant consequences for the students we serve. Across our schools, many students face substantial barriers to learning, including trauma, poverty, language barriers, and increasing mental health needs. Licensed social workers provide clinical mental health support that goes beyond general social emotional instruction. As clinicians, we conduct mental health assessments, provide counseling and crisis intervention, collaborate with families and outside providers, and help students develop the emotional regulation skills necessary to function in school. Many of the students we support are not eligible for special education services, yet still require meaningful mental health support in order to access their education. Our district has invested in social emotional learning initiatives, which can be valuable in supporting school climate and helping students build important life skills. However, social emotional instruction is not the same as clinical mental health support. Licensed clinicians provide assessment, counseling, and intervention for students experiencing significant emotional or behavioral challenges. These services are complementary, but they are not interchangeable. Reducing access to licensed social workers does not eliminate student mental health needs. It simply removes the trained professionals equipped to address them. Research consistently shows that students are more able to learn, regulate, and succeed academically when their emotional and mental health needs are supported. In districts with significant student needs, the question is not whether mental health support is necessary, but whether we are providing it through professionals trained to deliver that care. I respectfully encourage the board to carefully consider the long-term impact of eliminating licensed clinical social work, licensed clinical support in our schools. And I would simply ask this: in a district where many students face significant social and emotional challenges, is reducing access to licensed clinicians truly the direction we want to move? Thank you for your time and your continued commitment to the students in our district.
Thank you very much. I might suggest just for others, we are going to have budget discussions later on in the meeting, and other comments we can accept then related to the budget. So are there other public comments at this time? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Kelly Schusler. I'm a Lewiston resident, and like Stephanie, I also work as one of the general ed social workers at Montello. And I'm also here tonight to speak on the importance of the social worker role in our schools. We are clinical mental health professionals that provide a service students often don't have access to outside of school. The students that we work with often experienced trauma, family conflict, loss of loved ones, and a range of mental health struggles such as PTSD, anxiety, depression, and ADHD. Without specific targeted social emotional interventions, these students would not be able to learn in their classrooms. A typical day in a school social worker's life includes not only these targeted individualized clinical interventions, but also crisis risk assessments, de-escalation of unsafe behavior, coordination with teachers, admin, and families, meeting with teams to assess and reassess student support plans, and referrals to services in the community. Budget decisions are always difficult, and I know you do not take them lightly. I strongly encourage you to do right by the students of Lewiston and keep the current number of social work positions that we have in our schools. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 5, which is to receive and potentially vote on the field trip request to Maine Maritime Academy in Castine, Maine. Who's talking to us about this one? Okay.
Mr. Finney, yep. Travis Finney coming up to present.
The microphone's already off for you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, my name is Travis Finney, and I'm a resident of Phillips, Maine, but I work at Lewiston High School as the junior ROTC instructor. And yeah, I was hoping to seek approval to take some of my cadets to Maine Maritime Academy over the weekend of the 20th to the 22nd.
And this would be before you because it's overnight, but also includes water activities, or at
Yes.
least being on the boat.
Okay, questions from the committee? Member Jensen and then Member Bowden.
I move approval of the request.
Okay, is there a second of that before we continue? Okay, Member Glant.
I second it.
Okay, so it's moved by Member Jensen, seconded by Member Glant. Any questions? Yes, Member Bowden.
Sure, I just had a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I saw that there is water activities, one chaperone, 20 students, open swim in the pool. I just want to make sure that parents were given permission slips. Do we know that all of these students are capable of swimming?
Yes, ma'am.
All these
Permission
questions.
slips have been given out and signed. And then there will not be swimming if they are unable to get the lifeguards.
Okay,
But yes, ma'am, I do have signed certificates for the permission slips.
okay, wonderful. I guess that was my only concern. I always get a little nervous when I see
ma'am.
swimming with students. And how many lifeguards would there be? Do you know?
I don't, ma'am.
Okay. And it's just a pool?
Yes, ma'am,
Yeah,
an indoor
okay.
pool, yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. So it just says for a leadership course, like just a little more information about what you're doing there, what the students are doing there, what they're learning.
Sure. So quick breakdown, industry leading speakers and leadership panels, discussions on strengthening leadership qualities and characteristics, challenge activities that encourage teamwork and self-reflection. So the 20 cadets that I'm taking will break up into smaller groups to be led by their team captains. And then multi-agency appearances to explore post-high school service opportunities. And then again, the open swim in the pool.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll call the roll, starting with Member Hurd this week. Oh, sorry, do you have something? Good point. Okay, is there any public comment on this agenda item? Okay, see none, thank you. We will call the roll then, starting Member Hurd, Superintendent, please.
Member Hurd,
Yes.
Member Hawkins,
Yes.
Member Harper,
Yes.
Member Eames,
Yes.
Member Bowden,
Yes.
Member Jensen,
Yes.
Member McLaughlin,
Yes.
Counselor Harriman,
Yes.
and Member Glant.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great trip.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Do you mind turning the mic off there, Austin? Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to agenda item number 6, to receive and potential, well, just to receive in this case, the school committee subcommittee roles. So I think I can take this one unless you have something to add. Just, we don't need to vote on this, but this was just putting in writing what we discussed last time about the subcommittees. Are there any comments or changes that folks would like to see before we move forward with those? No? Okay, okay. Well, that's all we need on that agenda item. Not really anything to vote on. Next is agenda item number 7, to review and potentially vote on school committee procedural rules. I could start this one as well and see if superintendent has anything to add. This is just updating the rules that we just spoke about last week because of adding a vice chair. And just to make sure that the language made sense with respect to voting on the vice chair in addition to the parliamentarian, but still having the line about if neither the chair nor the vice chair are available, we still have a vote for a temporary chair, basically. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but just want to make sure. So that was really the only thing there. Do you have anything to add?
And I think I captured the edits that were mentioned last time, the typically, normally, except for the end time.
So any questions or discussion? Yes, Member Glant.
I do have a question. Considering last week's meeting, number 4 consent agenda. So if a member has a question or a comment or a concern about election of personnel, we are not, I mean, it was kind of uncomfortable or difficult to talk about that during our regular meeting. So should this be brought up prior to the meeting? Could there be something put in there about that?
So you can always have an item set aside. You can also edit, as long as folks are agreeable to it. The conversation that happened last week, it was a separate agenda item, so that I think made it a little more difficult to tease out than normal. But I would say when possible to do it before, as members of the committee know, we were working to get notice to people about renewals and non-renewals. So that delayed you getting the documentation. So that made it a little trickier last week than I think it normally would be. But yeah, notice is good, but also consent agenda items can be set aside or edited.
So if we have someone does want to set aside something, what's the procedure if it is personal? I'm just thinking, say we got something updated, Monday at 3:00 and we didn't have a chance to look at it. And got here early and we're looking at it and thinking, oh, maybe this is a concern. How do I bring this up?
So I think with a personnel related concern, I would say reach out to me as soon as you pick up on something. But also if you, let's say you saw a name and it rang a bell for you, I want to know a little more about this candidate. You could actually set aside the personnel component of the
I
agenda.
see.
And then we would look into whatever concern you had and bring that back.
Okay, thank you. But at a later time, not during like right now.
Right, you can't do it right in the moment,
Right.
typically, because if it's a personnel matter, we can't
Right.
talk about it without follow steps.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? Any public comment on our procedural rules? Okay, so we do need another vote on this. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Member Hurd, seconded by Member Bowden. Do you call the roll, please?
Member Hurd,
Yes.
Member Hawkins,
Yes.
Member Harper,
Yes.
Member Eames,
Yes.
Member Bowden,
Yes.
Member Jensen,
Yes.
Member McLaughlin,
Yes.
Counselor Harriman,
Yes.
and Member Glant.
Yes.
I know I'm going to goof this up at some point. Motion passes 9-0.
Okay, so that brings us to agenda item number 8, which is to receive and in some cases vote on the school committee officers. So these are 3 appointments, and the parliamentarian and vice chair appointments do require votes. So first, I would like to nominate or appoint Elizabeth Member Eames for the legislative liaison position. I think we spoke about this a little bit last time, and she expressed she was both willing and I think at least I feel more than capable of doing so. So that is the plan. Is there anything you would like to add?
It's just a busy season for
Yes.
for a few more weeks. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you for doing it. So the next, which we do need to vote on, would be the parliamentarian. And for that, I am appointing Member Jensen. I think Member Jensen has a good head for the rules of the committee, which is, I think, needed for that position. So is there anything you would like to add, Member Jensen? You don't have to, but just if you'd like to.
That's okay.
Okay, okay. So yeah, we do need to vote on this one. If committee members have any comments or questions, we can discuss. Member Bowden?
Are you making a motion for this, or do we need to make a motion for this?
I think my preference would be we just follow the usual process where the chair doesn't make motions.
Okay.
So just the usual motion.
So I'll make a motion that Member Jensen be our parliamentarian.
I'll second that. And are we gonna go to public comment?
Yes, we will for each of these, yes. So just first though, is there any comment from the members of the committee? Okay. Any public comment on the motion? Okay. So in that case, I think let's go ahead and call the roll.
Member Hurd?
Yes.
Member Hawkins,
Yes.
Member Harper,
Yes.
Member Eames,
Yes.
Member Bowden,
Yes.
Member Jensen,
Yes.
Member McLaughlin,
Yes.
Counselor Harriman,
Yes.
and Member Glant.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you. So that brings us to the next one, which is I'm appointing Member Bowden as the vice chair. I think it would be helpful, as we discussed last time, to just have someone designated to fill in when I'm not available. And I think Member Bowden is more than capable of running the meeting well. So is there anything you'd like to add? Okay, great. Yes, Member Hurd?
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve Janet Bowden as vice chair.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so moved by Member Hurd, seconded by Member Jensen. Any comments or questions from the committee? Is there any public comment on this item? All right, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Yes.
Member Hawkins,
Yes.
Member Harper,
Yes.
Member Eames,
Yes.
Member Bowden,
Yes.
Member Jensen,
Yes.
Member McLaughlin,
Yes.
Counselor Harriman,
Yes.
and Member Glant.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Great. Thank you all very much. So with that, the next item on the agenda is to review the conflict of interest form. I'll let Superintendent Langless take that.
It's just a quick reminder that annually, you're just asked to make sure that if there are any conflicts of interest for you as it relates to committee work, that you complete the form and submit that so that it be known. And then moving forward, if you do have conflicts of interest that arise, that you're familiar with that policy and you make that known and or abstain as appropriate according to local, state charter. There's different language in each of the pieces for it.
Any questions from members of the committee? Okay. All right. Yep. No vote or anything needed on this one. So I think we will move along to agenda item number 10, which is to review and potentially vote on the district goals themes.
So I'll be brief. I think the feedback last meeting was to try to simplify what was a more complex document and set of ideas that have various steps to them, to do more overarching areas or themes for goals. And so I tried to take from my notes and put into a simplified form as a starting point for future conversation.
Okay. So yeah, you can see the document here, and actually, would it be difficult to pull it up just so if anyone in the audience doesn't have it in front of them? I don't think tonight we need to have the full-fledged conversation and vote on anything yet, but I think just the conversation around are these 5 capturing the right kind of topic areas for one, getting further public input, which we discussed previously, and ultimately kind of setting the goals that we then work out over the course of the year. So any comments from members of the committee? Any thoughts? Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the list. I mean, just one thought is maybe we could work the graduation rate topic into the academic success topic and limit it to 4. That's just one thing that stood out to me. I think this pretty much hones in on the gist of what we were talking about last time. I mean, collectively what we were talking about. So I'm very happy looking at this. Just my initial thoughts, seeing it now, seeing it Thursday. I think there's a lot we can work with here.
Okay, Member Harper.
Thank you. I am not sure that student pathways is clear to me, and I'm wondering if other people maybe too, what that means.
I think it's the whole range of things. Historically, pathways have included different programming that we offer, ways to do credit recovery. That's more that graduation pathway, but also what other options do we have for kids who might be struggling to engage in school in the traditional manner. So I think there's an effort in my mind around reaching to younger and younger grades where we can, as it relates to pathways for intervention and support, as long as we can secure the resources. So it is kind of broad, but really it's outside of that typical schedule and layer of support for students.
Can I respond to that? Thank you. That's helpful. I imagine at some point, yeah, I'm happy to have other people share comments on these things, and then I also be curious at what point we are going to build off from these so that, yeah, it's a little bit more clear, like what is it, increasing student pathways? Is it like, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that is going to be the next step, sort of one iteration in the process of consolidating what we discussed last time. That did make me think, though, in thinking about Member Jensen's comment, I suppose the student pathways does touch on graduation rate quite a bit, potentially. It overlaps there. But a question I had for you is that also potentially covering things like more trades programming, technical education programming, or is that a little separate in your mind?
I think anything we do with trades outside of the typical junior, senior year trades, which we're trying to grow here locally, would definitely fit into that different pathway, different approach.
Thank you. Member Bowden.
I just want to say too, just for clarity, like historically, we had a pathways subcommittee where we would discuss different pathways to graduation, different ways, as the superintendent said, to like earn credits. But we also had some lengthy discussions about the makeup of our schools and possibly like 6, 7, 8 for the middle school instead of just 7, 8. So when we talked about pathways, it really was a broad conversation. And now that we have a new building in 287 Main Street, I think that needs to be part of the discussion as well, as like, how are we utilizing that building? I know we're already talking about that with the public and stuff, but also how it relates to how we are, maybe changing the map of our own buildings around the district, not just that one building. So that was also a piece of the subcommittee for pathways. So it is a really broad thing. Yeah, there needs to definitely be more of a breakdown on these bullets here, but yeah.
Member Eames.
But we asked them to,
Yeah, we did.
to consolidate into big headings, and so that's happened. Thank you. I agree, graduation rate it seems like a more particular, it's on a different level than the other things. So it could go either with pathways or with academic success, but I don't think it deserves its own heading personally. I think multiplying student pathways or multiplying and documenting might be, anyway, multiplying student pathways would probably make sense to say there. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, graduation rate is a number where the others are more conceptual. Okay. Any other thoughts at this time? Okay, certainly more to come on this, obviously, but any public comment on this topic? Okay. Yes, we'll continue working on that. Yes.
Where there's an opportunity for a motion, do you want me to edit this now and vote on it, or do you want me to you want us to just move forward with what we have so far and keep the notes?
Sorry, but yeah, member Hearn.
Thank you. I don't think we need to vote on it. I'm fine with it. It's kind of almost like a fluid document, I guess, you know? So I don't think there's any need to vote on something right now, because then that kind of like closes it down.
Yeah, I don't think we're at the point where we need to vote on this yet. That's my opinion. Okay. But yeah, I think this will be, coming back up in later meetings as we can flesh it out a little more. So any last thoughts on that before we move on? Okay. So next on the agenda is the budget workshop. I'll let the superintendent take over.
All right, so we're gonna start, whether you want to flip through the binder or look at the documents on your tablets, whichever works for you. I'll put some things up as I walk through, but I also want to make sure that folks can see discussion if there's that happening. I'm gonna just start at the front with, it's pretty straightforward, but table of contents. There's some items that I'll be referencing here pretty immediately. But if you look at the articles, these are separated by article by rule. This is the states, essentially their general accounting practices articles. And so when we look at what articles there are, these are what get voted on as a group when we go to referendum. And so we break them down in article because of their different specified area. But these become the warrant articles for the actual vote. And just to walk through, Article 1 is regular instruction. Article 2 is special education. Article 3 is career and technical instruction. And Article 3 is specifically Lewiston Regional Technical Center programs that are both in Lewiston and Auburn. But I just don't want to confuse it with other technical type things. Article 4 is other instruction. Article 5 is instructional support. 6 is system administration. 7 is school administration. Article 8 is transportation. 9 is facilities and operations. 10 is debt service. So if we have debt service on expansion of a high school or things of that nature, the debt service is listed each year. I like to point that out because whenever we take on debt, Lewiston Public Schools anyway, the payment of that debt is built into the budget. And we like to point that out because sometimes the debt conversation makes it feel like the bills get paid elsewhere, but they really don't. And so just as a mental note, sometimes you see debt service go up or down, and it's based on the status of a particular project and what the funding source is and whether or not it's just local or state and all those pieces. Article 11 is just other items that don't fit into the prior 10. And then adult education is not an article. It is an entity that exists within our budget process, but it's not an article item, just for budgeting purposes. So if we move forward, you can get to my budget memo, which if you give me a moment, I'm going to pull it up here. Don't know how I missed it, but there it is. I'm thinking, oh gosh, tell me I did not forget. All right, so we obviously shared this out publicly, but as we work through the budget process, the way this will unfold, tonight we're really doing an overview of some components. Wednesday we'll get into more detail as we start going through different articles. But I think it is worth noting, and I know some people made mention during public comment about the value of different positions. But as we walk into this budget, we had an increase in state subsidy, which we will talk about. But we also know that we have a local tax burden. So as we propose the budget, prior to some work on our end with the what we call the superintendent's version of the budget, we were looking at a $6.5 or more million increase in our budget, and that's with doing nothing different. And I was not comfortable bringing that to you or to our community, and so we've had to take some steps, and we'll share those in detail as we work through the budget process. But the proposed budget that I'm bringing to you has 30 positions reduced from it. And I say this with a heavy heart that 23 of those are actively filled positions that have staff in them that work with our kids daily. So that's heavy, at least for me, because I think everything that we do to reduce, we're reducing something for kids and or staff supports. But I do think it was responsible to do that, to bring it to you from a fiscal perspective. Now, ultimately, what lands in the budget or not is the school committee's decision. That's the next round of this budgeting process. So think of it as I brought you a start off point, and you can agree with shifts that I'm recommending. You can choose others. We'd like to make sure we inform those things with our administrative team, who's principals and directors here in the back. But ultimately, what gets approved by you at some point in April becomes the school committee version of the budget. And then we present that, I present that to the city council, and they have an opportunity to provide feedback. And then we bring it a second time for a vote. And if it passes, then that is considered the city council version of the budget, and that's what makes it to the referendum. If at any point along the way, things don't make it in, if you will, they're not in there. So in this version, there's things that I've made tough decisions on. They're not in here, and we'll go through those on Wednesday. But when you do the work that you do, if there are things that are not in there or things you want to add, that becomes part of the budget. And then when it gets to the city council, they cannot decide what is in the budget, but they can make pretty strong recommendations or fail the vote on a number. So they're voting on the fiscal component of the budget. They don't get to decide what's in the budget, what's not. That rests with you. So just remember that as we work through the process. So I wasn't going to bring $6.5 million local increase to you. So we did some work with some revenue components we think we can work with, but also those reductions, as I mentioned. I'll say it a lot and hopefully spread the word, but May 12th is the referendum vote on the local school budget. And as a reminder, people, that vote is specifically for schools. It is not a city vote. It's not the city's budget. It's not the city's use of unexpended funds or authorizations. It is solely the school-specific vote in that referendum. We've worked to. It'll take me a second. The language we're trying to shift to, in past budgets, we've talked about growing a something, growing a pathway, growing supports for, and in this particular budget, I'm having to default to words like maintain. I don't think we have the financial resources, as I proposed, to grow much of anything. I think we can work to maintain it, and some things will be reduced, but I'm hopeful that the efforts that we've made to present this budget to you will help maintain things. There are some areas of addition, and we'll talk about some different cost drivers. The Career and Technical Center, so LRTC, has received some more funding, but also is expanding some programming, and there's some associated costs with that. Good thing, but again, it pulls from subsidy as we do that work. Our special education program growth, now this is like climb when we talk about that effort, and I try to be very intentional with my language over the last several years about deflecting cost. I do think that it deflects cost, but it is not inexpensive to run very specialized programs, plus the services, plus transportation. We did work hard to stay with a continuing my philosophical background with fund balances to use as little as possible. This uses 3.5 million in the revenue, which I'll talk about more, but it's not 6, but it's not as low as I prefer to be. And the reason for that concern is always if you don't have unexpended funds, then you have nothing to use next year. And so this year is a good example of that. I've shared with you that we have concerns about our budget in the current year that we will run over, which means there'll be no unexpended funds in the future. And so if you're using 3.5 million to start your growing next year's budget, you're not replenishing that in any way. So you hit a 2-year cycle of using 3.5 million. If you're not carrying 3.5 million through your budget cycle, you get to a point where you have nothing, so you can't use it. And then we sometimes refer to that as the cliff. That is that year when you need the 3.5 million or whatever you've decided to use for your startup funds. And if it doesn't exist, you start to shrink your resource pretty quickly. We presented an 11% increase, which is, it's actually less than 3 of the last 4 years. We did some looking back. Last year, we raised locally the smallest percentage, and you can see in the chart below that we've actually raised in multiple years at 3%. But you can see the multiple years prior as high as 17 plus a 13, a 12, and this local impact proposed is a 12.39% increase. Again, working through the memo, the school portion of the funding for Lewiston would be 35 million, 35.4 million. And that's an overall budget when you add the external subsidy of 130.5 million. As an example, I think sometimes people think of that number and like, oh my gosh, that's a big number. It is. We're very mindful of that. Portland's approved budget last year, and they just released towards the end of last week their proposed budget for this year, which is about $50 million more than ours. I know we're not Portland, but when we look at demographics, different pockets of poverty and some challenges, and size, Portland is the closest in some comparable ways to us. Other districts that are kind of considered Class A are just so much smaller than us, sometimes by thousands, that it's not easy to compare. And we are a large receiver of state subsidy, but that is for good reason. And I'll talk about the EPS formula. We'll walk through it here in a few minutes. Again, this first chart is just showing the year by year local contribution percent increase. The next chart, again, it's a colorful rendition of essentially that red area being how much of our budget comes directly from state subsidy. It's obviously the biggest portion of it. It's approaching 70% of our budget is state subsidy. There's other details of the memo. People are welcome to look at it, and I'll keep knocking on that door of May 12th. Get out and vote. There's also a link here at the bottom that people can use if they are curious about absentee ballots, which for a school budget it's always been there. It's just a tighter window because of when the city takes up the vote. It's a pretty short window between that and the actual vote on May 12th. But if people want that as an option, there are resources there for that. And then, where's my... Just sharing some highlights. The next page, at least in your binder, is the amended or updated budget timeline. Depending on how long some of these items take, they can be pushed day to day. So administrative team has been committed to wanting to be here to answer any questions you may have, but they'll be here to share other information as needed. So when we look at the timeline, there's a lot of items between the 11th and the 18th. Just as a quick mental note, on the 16th, next Monday, we have the joint meeting with City. That's when we share an overview. But then this Wednesday and the following Wednesday, we get pretty thick into items. But we also have multiple dates at the end of March that are, if needed. Usually we need them when we get talking about things. So when you look at the 18th in the schedule, if you see a lot of items there, if we don't get to all of them, it's okay. We can push them. We don't have to stay here till 2 o'clock to do a review, unless you want to. But and then I think just some dates to highlight. The presentation to the city is on April 7th. We do ask that you approve a budget in around that window so that what we're presenting to city is what they would be taking up for a vote. They can sometimes provide feedback that asks you to relook at things, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes a committee wants to receive that input, sometimes a committee doesn't, so that will be your decision. And then moving forward, May 5th is a big day. That's when the city council will have its first opportunity to vote on the school budget, and you can see just 1 week later, the referendum. So that's that tight window I mentioned. Not on here, but also around this time, which makes it challenging for a school budget, is mid to late April is when folks will get their first installment bill for their property taxes. And so that this year with the revaluation will be a topic. It's going to have impacts on folks, and we're very mindful of that. But just so you know, the timing of you looking at approving your version of the budget and it going to the city for a referendum is right in that same window of people getting their new tax bills from the revaluation. So I'm going to open up online just on the Zoom
think,
side, share my screen.
Member Glant has a question.
Sure.
Member Glant?
Thank you for that rundown and explanation. It's very helpful. My question is, the 23 active positions that you're proposing, when will we know what those positions are? And do those people, the people involved, when will they know that their positions are scheduled?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Wednesday, I intend to share with you what those specific positions are with other ideas around them. Folks are being notified
Okay.
actively. We do think it's important that we have that conversation, but please note, just because I've made a reduction doesn't mean you have to
Right.
accept them. And I'll also have ideas for how we might cover some of those gaps with different positions, which you could also have different ideas on. So,
Just being it public, first time I've seen it, of course. Once you hear 23 positions are on the chopping block, so to speak, there's going to be a lot of questions for us. And, just to let you know that.
I think the reason I have such a pause, even when I bring it up, is the idea that we would provide less for kids, right? Nobody here wants to do that. But also knowing that these are people's livelihoods. This is how they put food on the table and, take care of their families. So it's heavy. It's really, really heavy when we talk about actual people and not vacant positions. There are some vacant, but we've looked and we're at people for sure.
Member Bowden?
Just on that same topic, I mean, I know you're going to go into it more, but are these positions that are like grant funded in the past and now they no longer can be, or are these positions that were in our budget last year that we're cutting out? Can you
So
explain that?
yeah, so there's multiple things happening right now. So we have some grants that are sunsetting, some of it federal administration directed, some of it just federal. We also have grants that have stayed relatively constant, but because people get their steps and raises, there's not enough room in them to continue to pay their full salary. But the shifts I'll be mentioning or sharing with you on Wednesday are people and items that are that were in the budget coming into this year as part of our efforts that are taken out. So that list does not include folks in a grant the grant is drying up. It does not include them. Does that answer the question? Because I guess what I'm saying is there are more than that because of funding stopping, these items that I'll be talking about are essentially in the budget. Some of the themes I'll share might cross over into different areas, and I'm happy to explain that when I do. But when I say 23 and 30, those are not grant, those are in the budget, positions that we're removing.
I'm just trying to figure out how we can have that many positions that we were able to fund this last year that we suddenly have to cut out. Like, where are the other increases coming from to make it so that it, I mean, if these are staff who are working with our students, how, what, can you at least explain a little bit, like where are the increases coming from that are potentially taking these positions out?
So we'll start talking about cost drivers,
Mm.
some tonight and then more heavily on Wednesday. That's why I was trying to do the overarching piece today and then talk about the who and the why on Wednesday.
Yep.
But it's heavy.
That's just significant. That's all. That number just kind of shocked me when I saw it. So
Well, I heard Member Glant say we've never really had to do that, but we actually have. We last year in my memo, I was looking back at last year's version, we had cut 61 positions in the prior 2 years. And so if we correct, so there was a lot of vacant, or mostly vacant. But short of additions in areas like special education for specific program growth, and a couple other small items that we've added over the years, we have really reduced. This year, I think, I didn't do the math specifically, and you'd have to subtract the growth in the programs like Climb, where there's a lot of staff. But short of that added growth, which is an added cost, we've reduced by about 100 positions in the last 4 years. Again, many of them vacant until now. I'm just going to pull up the ED2 Center. Any other questions about where we're at?
Member Hurd and then Member Eames, and then hopefully we can continue.
Thank you. So it's not really a question. I'm just letting you know I will be emailing you and for things like I want to know the last time we went out to RFP, and I've said this before, for everything that our district uses. Like, are we, like, what kind of rogue spending is going on? Like the teacher that hops on and says, oh, I just need this quick from Amazon and adds it to cart. Like, if we can, like, we need to make sure that we're under contract for literally everything from pens and pencils to like the big things that our classrooms need. So I'm going to be emailing that to you. So I'm sure some of that you'll push back on admin because they're going to need to get that to you. But I mean, if we're looking at cutting 30 actual people, I mean, would you rather have free range to buy whatever pen you want, or you want to keep a position in the classroom? I guess like that's kind of where we're at now. So
Yeah, and then I'm happy to get that kind of information through our vendor purchasing list. I think the other thing too that we want to be mindful of is sometimes it's a PTA, a PTO, a grant. There's other ways that we get supplies in. So there's like the district version, and then there's all of the other peripheral components. But I'm happy to get that thing. But I would also say, and I know there's administrators in the room, but teachers, unless there's a grant or like the PTA or PTO showed up and said, hey, you have an opportunity to do this, there is no teachers jumping into Amazon to buy the whatever through the school's anything. But I will say I know of teachers and live with one that goes out and buys lots of things with their own money and they just eat it. So there's that layer too. But we can talk about our different bid processes and what have you for sure.
Member Eames.
Just jumping off of what Member Bowden said, the fact that grants are sunsetting and people are going away just means there's even less for the kids next year. Not just the 23 positions, but actually all of those as well that are being lost to our children. So I just thought I would mark that. Thanks.
Yeah, on Wednesday, would you mind, to the extent you can, showing that as well, even though it's not coming from the general fund, just so we can see the full picture?
Yeah, we can pull the list of folks that are in grants that are sunsetting or have sunset and bring that to you as well. I can emphasize, like, in the budget or cut from the local budget versus
Right.
not. I
Yes,
think that's an
please.
important separator.
Member Glant.
Thank you. Can you give us any information as to whether these are mostly frontline teachers, administration? What are your
So I
I know,
really
you
need to
talk
talk about
about it
Wednesday because
Wednesday.
we still have professionals, you know, if they took a day or if we have an administrator not available, there's still communications happening. And I think we owe that to our folks to have that conversation with them before we say it here. All right, I'm transitioning to what's called the ED 279. I'll put it up on the screen. But if you look at it's really page 2 of this tab. Page 1 is revenue, which I'll come back to after. I'm going to share this. I mean, Austin, do you have a sense that people from home will be able to see this okay? Because I know it's just a lot, but I don't know how to zoom and make it.
It is also available on our website if
Yes.
people at home want to pull it up. Okay.
Yes, this is available at the state level. So what we refer to as the ED 279 is also referred to as EPS, which stands for Essential Programs and Services. This is essentially the subsidy formula. These are the metrics that are visible. And I say visible because there's also formulas that happen behind the scenes. But from the state, here is how they got to our subsidy number. And it goes by area and respective categories and subcategories. We work hard to make sure our data is accurate so that we receive what we should. I will also note that we are the top receiver in the state of Maine, so we get millions and millions of more dollars here locally because of our level of need and different factors, and also our size. But as we work through, we talk about having philosophical ideas and wants and needs in that month of November, December as it relates to the budget. But really, until this comes in late January, early February, we don't know where we're going to be at. This year, it is up. So that is to our benefit. As far as it relates to anything this is up that we do, we don't have to ask for dollars locally to do. Does that make sense? So as you work through the different sections, you can see section 1 right here at top left is the computation of EPS rates. I'm not going to go through every single line of this, but when you look at the subcategories, you see the attending counts. They have rules for how quickly those attending counts roll over, what kids are included in that, what kids are not, and why. And then you can see the October 24 and October 25 numbers. And so when we have big fluctuations, but they don't carry through these different marking periods, we're absorbing a lot of cost to educate kids. But if they don't make it through those detailed data cycles, they're not captured in subsidy. And that's intentional because it's multi-year. Go ahead.
Just a quick question on that, because and I may have asked this in previous years, but that number does tend to be lower than our own internal counts. What tend to be the categories that are missed there?
So there's a few things. One is what level of funding is available for students who have been expelled, even though we provide services. Also, there's a skew in the numbers because of LRTC. So these attending pupils are not the attending pupils of LRTC. That's funded differently, but also in this document, if for what it's worth. So that's the big shift on the numbers. And even when we do the counts with LRTC, because we're serving those students as a region, which we are obligated to do so and are happy to do so, there's often overlap. So when we look at LRTC's attendance overall or enrollment overall, some of those kids are also Lewiston students, a good portion of them. So when we have to do the math, we disaggregate the two. And so we have claim for subsidy for some of them in CTE and not for others because of how this is structured. In B, you have staff positions. These are not our actual positions. This is what the state says in the formula. Based on strictly, this is not an emotional process for the folks at the state that do this work. It is just straight ratios. It also doesn't dictate how you have to spend the money. So this is how they get to your subsidy number, but they're not saying you must have this many full-time teachers. They're saying locally, you have to make that decision based on your student body, but we give you recommendations for ratios, which you can see here. For the first one, it says teachers, it says 15 to 1. I can assure you we have a lot of classrooms that are not 15 to 1. They're bigger than that. But I can also assure you that some districts that get less subsidy than we do, because they have more wealth in their community, those ratios that they have are oftentimes smaller than 15 to 1, and the cost they spend per pupil is far greater than ours. We actually have done some work on that to present to the state as recently as today with LD 2226, which talks about funding and some changing ratios with transportation, students that are economically disadvantaged, some different approaches to special ed funding. So we share testimony on behalf of that. It could benefit Lewiston. It won't be this year though. When you keep going down, you can see computation of benefits. Part D is other support per pupil cost. And you can see that, again, this is the state formula version of how much of what things they're funding, but it doesn't mean you have to have those things. If I skip into section 2, which is just the next page, it gets into obviously operating costs, those allocations, and you can start to see different kind of what they call basic counts and then weighted counts. And then with that, targeted funds, we don't decide. Those are state initiatives over time, but there are targeted funds for things like assessing students. And so when you think of targeting funds, and I'm not saying this is perfect, but when legislation passes something and then they allocate for it, this is how it gets pulled into the funding formula. So these decisions were made over time, and that's how it's built into the funding formula. Weighted counts. So for example, I want to show you under C where it says weighted counts right here. I'm trying to highlight up there. You can see pre-K, K-8, 9-12 disadvantage. And then way over to the right, you can see a spot where it says EPS weights. And right now it says 0.15. The proposed legislation would change that to 0.38. So we would see that number more than double for disadvantaged students. And you can see the funds here. My math on a rough estimate with numbers, we were about 1.2 million in increased subsidy if they change that to a 0.38. We also have our multilingual learners, and you can see that there's EPS weights to that. In the current process with the state, outside of EPS funding, they also have what they call hardship funds. And so if you meet, there's a percentage, and I don't know if that percentage varies by year. I'm kind of looking at Liza, but if I actually think it moves, it's based on new students. But if you hit a certain percentage, you get additional subsidy, which we have hit in the past, but it's not a given every year. But you can see how those students are weighted for the subsidy formula. Targeted funds I mentioned. The part E, isolated small school adjustment. This is more for those more rural type schools that are more spread out. Not critical to us, but they have adjustments built in because they're trying to pull kids from all over the place to one small school, and it's pretty costly. See here, part 3, we have our other components, and here's where you see GT. There's also a special education EPS allocation. So if you look at that, that's 26,810,000. And I like to point that number out because when we talk about special education, you're going to see some costs. But before we say things like $30 million or almost $30 million, please note that the EPS subsidy is saying that we need this level of budgeting around it. You can see the approved bus allocation, like for us, 0, because we contract that. This is the other areas. High cost out of district. That's another formula that happens throughout the year, and it's an adjustment. There is debt service here. You can see that we are currently at 0 because we don't have any state funded projects built into our EPS formula at the moment. Moving to section 4. This is where the state uses the assessed valuation to generate what they think the city of Lewiston taxpayers can pay based on their rate. So when you see the mill rate expectation of 5.645 here, they're taking a valuation from state data and and I don't want to say they're picking a number, but they're choosing a number for that mill rate piece. And then you can see what the state says the city taxpayers should pay at a minimum. And this is where we get into that minimum local share language. If you don't spend, and this one is 20.34 million, if we don't raise that locally, for every dollar we don't raise, we actually lose subsidy. In that municipality type approach, you can see the $78 million number there. The next page is just totals and adjustments. We've already talked about these pieces, but I want to draw your attention to main care seed, which is right here, line 10. So main care seed, Kirsten's going to talk about this a fair amount on Wednesday night. But when we have different reimbursements that are built out, so when our out-of-district kids, we're also responsible for what we call main care seed. That number's in the millions now. And so we'll talk about how that's impacting us. But you see zeros in subsidy, but we're responsible for it. This just is a layout of the disbursements. So we receive funds monthly based on how they disperse their funds. I do want to pause on this page a little bit because while these EPS subsidy funds are scheduled to be dispersed monthly, they also sit in a bank account. And part of what we're looking at from a revenue perspective is the interest that is gained by those. I want to argue that that should land with schools as revenue. And we're in conversation with the city about how that might work. It hasn't to date, but we have become aware of other districts that do this. And we're just trying to learn more from them because it's not just an easy thing to do. There's some steps to it. But we would like to find a way to at least harness much of our expected interest annually as part of revenue, which again would further reduce what we're asking of taxpayers. Hit it. Right now I want to questions on EPS. It's the kind of thing you can talk about all day, and there's a lot of legislative language around it, the funding formula, but if you don't have to talk to it all day, you don't really want to. But I'm happy to answer any questions. The questions that I can. We ask a lot of questions about the funding formula because we want to make sure that we're leveraging all of our data, all of our abilities to bring that revenue in. Next up, if we can transition, I'd like to talk about the revenue sheet, which is the first page under that tab, which has the big yellow column. Let me just go to that. All right, so this is our revenue sheet, and I always like to remind people that when we look at our budget, we look at revenue as money coming in, and our expenditures are what you see in the budget detail. That's money going out. And so from just that basic accounting purpose, when we look at revenue, we're looking at the money coming in as a whole. And so this sheet shows you a multi-year comparison in each related category. And it shows you the different percentage and variances. Careful with percentages. Sometimes it's a massive percentage, but it's a small number. And sometimes it's a small percentage, but it's actually a very big number. And so you want to be reading these all the way across as you go. But when we look at the multi-year comparisons, our subsidy breakdown top left goes subsidy, then CTE, and then you see the debt service. For example, the debt service for CTE is tied to a bond where we were allowed to buy equipment. So there's some debt service connected to that. I think that's what it is. You see me look that way. So Bill, Adam, Karen, and Sue, these are my fact checkers. So that whole panel over there. as we work through, you can see the total state subsidy when we look at debt service. So that's the state's contribution for different projects. And that lands at $89 million. So that's funds coming to Lewiston from just state formula. When you look at the variance for things like debt service, as we pay it down, it's the money coming to us to pay that down is less. So anything related to debt service and the revenue, just think of it as all we do is process it. We don't actually get to use that money for anything else. The funding comes to us, we write the mortgage check, it goes right back out. But we're the fiscal agent because we're the municipality. Locally, you can see local only debt service, and that's when you get into things like high school expansion, things of that nature. And then additional local. So additional local is the number above what the state says is the minimum. So I want you to be thinking of that. So the additional local we were looking at was the 2.32 right here as far as proposed. And then total local 3.8. So when we talk about what are we asking of our community for the main components of our articles, that's what that number represents, that 3.8. Sure.
Just to butt in there, just to be clear, that's not the percent mill rate change. That is the number, just the absolute number.
That's correct. And actually, we usually share the mill rate and the proposed adjustment and how much is the penny and all that kind of stuff on nights like tonight. But with the revaluation, that's still being retooled. So as soon as we have it, we'll share it. We did talk about it today internally. Talked to Phoenix about it today. We don't have a set time for when we'll have that, but I know that they're working on it. So the reval has complicated that mill rate conversation a little bit, but we will have a number here eventually. The hard part with that when we get it, and I'm sorry you have to listen to my voice so much, but I'll explain it again at that point. The mill rate, because of the reval, it's not going to tell a consistent story from, well, last year it was this, and now this year I can feel the growth or difference because every homeowner and property owner is going to have a different tax bill this year. And so person to person, it's going to be hard to say, well, this is like getting, 4 cups of coffee a month, because it's going to be vastly different from neighbor to neighbor. Also in here under revenue, you can see main care reimbursement. So what that is, we're estimating to get at least $1.5 million in main care reimbursement. If we get more than that, we have more revenue. If we don't get that, we've estimated that we're going to, and now we're short. And so when you see the numbers in here, some of those are projections. You can also see in here, I put interest revenue for $500,000. We estimate it's 8 or maybe a little more than $800,000. We're still working with the state to figure out how we can leverage and harness those funds for school use. There may be a point in time where that's feasible or not. And so that $500,000 is a real conversation that we have to figure out before we get too far in the process. Or if it doesn't come to fruition, that revenue won't exist, at least from a school perspective. Remember, question?
Thank you. Where has that interest revenue gone in the past?
It goes to the city.
So the city gets interest from our subsidy.
From the holdings, yep.
Interesting. And what does the city do with that interest revenue?
I'm assuming they claim it in their revenue when they build their budget. So it's like on their revenue sheet of.
But it's really shouldn't
know
be
that.
revenue for them. It should be revenue for us.
That's my sentiment. But I want to play nice too. So we're trying to walk through it. It does happen elsewhere, but it doesn't happen everywhere. And so there is some legwork behind it. That's why we put 500 instead of the 8, instead of trying to figure out the exact pennies every year. It does feel sensible to figure out that year over year it's X amount. So this is a safe amount to hold. And I think if the actuals play out different, they could be known and used in the following year. No, you're good. I have some other thoughts, but I'll share them later in the process. So here you can see, again, that total other, again, this is money coming in, not the money going out, although it does. you can see fund balance use. So this is that 3.5. We do have that. We could do that. And that puts the total general fund, at least for revenue, at 129.6. And then you have adult education. And then you have some other components. I'll add it up at the bottom here. These are just your grand total section. So that's not a new section. It's just the grand total of each subsection above it of full budget of 130.5 million. Overall, that would be an increase in revenue from last year of 12.9 million. So when we figure the additional state revenue, the additional, everything we put in here, our additional ask, the revenue sheet and the final budget have to match. So that's the money coming in and the money going out. Questions?
Different numbers have come up as the percentage change. There's 11, well, I guess this is where you got the 11, but then there's also 12.39 or somewhere else.
Yeah.
What's going on with those two different numbers?
Yep, the difference between those two numbers, one is local share and one is overall. So the when you see the 11%, that's the overall, and then the 12 point something, I forget what it was, is the local ask, 12.9. 12.39 is the additional. So that percentage is based on the local increase, and then the other one is based on the whole budget. Yeah, they are close though, so it's.
Yeah.
Yep. Questions on the revenue sheet for now?
Yeah, Counselor Herman.
Thank you. I apologize if I'm not seeing it right off, but what is our current fund balance at? And what will it be at after this proposed 3.5 million?
So I'm going to look to Adam on that one. From our audit process, we do have fund balance unassigned. I know a number I want to say, but Adam can pull it up, but we can share that. So if we stayed at the 3.5, roughly, we have a couple years worth of that, or almost a couple years of that. But he'll find the unassigned fund balance. Adam, just throw a hand up whenever you have it. I'll move to, or you already have it. Okay. 7.1 million in current fund balance. I also want to press on caution buttons too, because while we're reconciling some things, especially in transportation, we could be looking at being in the red this year. And so I'm exploring other ways to stop being in the red, and also other ways to fund with our own balances, what we can do. Question?
Member Harper and then Member Plant.
I was just curious, the fund balance, does that grow if you have savings at the end of a year? Is that how it?
Yeah, for the most part, unless some other random anomaly happens, it's really funds you receive in addition to your expected revenues or unexpended funds. And both of those things have happened, especially as we came through COVID. We were trying to be smart with federal dollars so that we could have this 7.1 to ease the transition out of it. But also, when I mentioned the hardship funds, those come in as revenue. They don't dictate how we use them, but we have been using them as smartly as we can. But when we have an influx of students and we need another multilingual teacher, we draw on those hardship funds. But at the end of the year, if they're not all spent, those can also become part of fund balance of the audit process.
Member Glant and then Member Bowden.
What was I going to say? Nutrition, our nutrition balance is going to be something that we're going to have to fund. Because I remember being told that that's going to be in the red.
Yeah, so I'll tell more of a story about that when we get there. But yes, we put in $100,000 this year for nutrition specific funding. We have been a CEP school, which I actually don't even know what all the acronyms are, but we qualify because of our level of economically disadvantaged and poverty students to get a sizable reimbursement from the federal government as it relates to nutrition. The state has passed some efforts to also support that, but what's happening is some of it's, we predict it's going to roll back a little bit, or at least stay flat, which doesn't help when you have people getting their steps and their raises and their insurance goes up and all of those pieces. So we're estimating that this year, or this next fiscal year, we will need to have funds available to pay people their paychecks. So yes, I think you're recalling right from last year, we talked about, I think we had like a $20,000 conversation last year. We knew that this next fiscal year would be more of a challenge.
Member Bowden.
Thank you. Do we have any updates on insurance rates?
This is like my favorite topic. So for those of you who are new to this process, we don't know our insurance rates until usually the third or fourth week of March. I keep my fingers crossed for the third. So what we do is we budget an amount. So this year we budgeted 15% because we had a neighbor that got 15% last year. And we know that this is based on usage and we can see some of our usage stats. So we know that we were, I wouldn't say over, but we were definitely high on usage. Over is bad. That's when you start to see things. We'll talk about some of those cost drivers, but we budgeted 15%. We did, after we built the budget, get a notice that it'd be capped at 14%. But we don't know the actual. Now, we've had years where it's come in at really, really low. And so we can instantly grab those funds back out of the budget, or you can allocate them as you see fit. But we don't know the number. Once we find it, it's like, well, there's a few times a year that I'm just like staring at the screen, hitting refresh, and insurance number is one of them. ED 279 is another one. I know I'm really boring. But this is one that between the group of us, when it comes in, we're like, what do we get? And we share it in case someone else isn't looking at it right away. The lower that number is, the better, because we budgeted 15%. And so if it doesn't increase 15%, everything less than that is an immediate savings. And at one point in time last year, Adam, we did like a percent by percent calculation. I don't remember what it was, but
Didn't we budget like super high last year too, and it came back super low? I'm not trying to jinx us.
no, I think
but-
last year we budgeted 12
Yeah,
and it came in at 6 maybe.
Yeah.
Or
it's good.
was it less than that? I remember, I think it was a $730 something thousand right out of the budget when that came in.
So if that were to happen,
Yeah. Last 2 years have been pretty low, 3 or 6.
if that happens again, we have some potential to save some positions.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
wonderful.
The next tab, I don't want to dive too deep into the budget articles, but you can see just a super quick by article percent change and whatnot. The tab after that, not tab, excuse me, the page right after that, these are just detailed descriptors of the articles. So if you are working through the budget and thinking, oh gosh, what is Article 3? And you know, Jake talks about this stuff like crazy, but I have no idea what he's talking about. Like, it took me a long time to understand it too, but we tend to know what things are in which articles. So if we're going too fast or we just are referring to things, I try not to use abbreviations or like jargon or code whenever possible. But if you catch me, like, just say, please explain that. I think even folks that have been around the table for a long time, if you're not doing it all the time, you'll still have a moment where you're wanting a clarification on that. But we'll have different areas too. So like when we talk about regular instruction, it's easy to say, well, it's everything not special ed and not CTE. Well, it's a little more detailed than that in this, and that can be helpful.
Member Eames.
So that 279% increase for other is the nutrition. It's that nutrition hit.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep,
thanks.
exactly. Right, so after the article descriptors, there's a good guide in here for the budget terms. As we go, I think last year, member Eames caught a couple that we should add, and we did. But as we go, if you feel like this should be in here for people to reference, please let us know. We can add them. But here, this is pages of references that we use on a regular basis, probably much of it today, at least in my world, but it can be all over the map. We did do it alphabetical on purpose. So if you're searching for a term, we try to do it alphabetically. Yeah.
There is just a minor thing where they say it's 23 and it's 26, 27 now. So fiscal year, when we first did this, I think
Oh,
it was
gotcha.
probably then, but it's the same acronyms, but it's a
Yes.
different year.
Fiscal year,
Yeah.
yes. We can update that reference. Yep. So Bill gets mad at me when I do this, but I will sometimes say last year and next year. So last year in Jake's brain is right now. That's this budget we're living. That's FY26. But I'll reference it like last year, and Bill likes to correct me, like we're in that right now. We're not. That's not last year, and he's right. So if I try to catch myself on those, and then when I talk about next year, that's this budget process that will be in use in the coming school year. It's important to note that our fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. The federal fiscal year does not. It's the end of September. October 1st, yeah.
Yes.
I know that we have to spend by the 30th of September every year.
Yes, yes.
So we deal with different fiscal years. Where this might come up when we see things like a grant sunsetting, like this year we have a grant that's actually in litigation. And every so often we get a notice that it's still in litigation, so you get your disbursement. We have people in those roles. And so if that disbursement stops, obviously we have an issue. We work to cover it with whatever other grants and funding we can. But this can sometimes be a crunch. So last year was a big crunch with title funds because they hadn't been released. So we have numerous employees in title funds, but even well into July, we didn't know what we were going to get. And so I think that will be better this year, but if it's not, we are in the wind on those. If we don't get the funds, and I know that members of the committee last year and members of our staff and the public were asking me, what's your plan if you don't get title funds? And the real plan is we can't do anything that's in the title funds, and there's a lot of positions. And so there's no backup money for those roles. But there's your budget education terms for your consideration. Let's see if there's any other documents that I want to review tonight. Bear with me.
Member Hawkins.
While Jake is checking on that, I just want to thank them for providing these terms and breakdowns for us. I have been out of this loop for a while and was looking at some of this and going, so this is a huge help, especially with acronyms. I am fairly quick, but yeah, lost is not good. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
The last thing I'm seeing on the agenda that I want to make sure I touch on, but again, we'll give you more detail on Wednesday, are cost drivers. And so there's some that are known, right? So salaries and benefits, the related cost increase to those are negotiated, collective bargaining agreements, contracts, what have you. So those are real and living as a cost driver. There's some others this year that are not always. So insurance, we don't know about yet, but that is a cost driver. Transportation, new contract, different costs, $2.5 million cost driver. We have power. So we had a 5-year buy-in program that retired in December, I believe it was. That went out through the bid process, connected to the city, and our energy cost for next year is up $750,000. So we can try to conserve power, but that's a cost driver. Things that are more fixed than variable. Another big one is workman's comp. That's a very big hit this year. Bill, I'm looking up, did we get the latest number on that? Because I know there's a city and school related component. $1 million. I wanted to say 1.2, but I didn't want to be wrong. So $1 million workman's comp, $750,000 for power, $2.5 million for transportation, $100,000 for nutrition, salaries, increases, insurance, we'll hear about more later. Any other of the major cost drivers? We'll get into them in detail, but I'm looking at you, Bill, to see if there's anything else you want me to throw in. Yeah. He needs his airtime.
Yeah, right. Adam and I have just been looking at this, constantly, but it really comes down to six major cost drivers. So six or almost 70% of your budget is personnel costs. So personnel and benefits. So those are two kind of cost drivers that increase the budget. Then you have what's going on with special ed, transportation, and then those two outliers that Jake just said, which was electricity and the workers' comp. Those are the real big cost drivers that from say a zero budget, that's what really went up quite a bit.
Can I ask about the workman's comp thing? Why would that increase so much one year? I mean, yeah, I saw you did share something in the packet where it's up 112% in one fiscal year, which why would that be?
So we're self-insured, and I may call Adam up here because he's a little better with this stuff, but going through the process and what claims we had and everything, the quotes came back for a pretty big sizable increase. And that happened on both the city side and the school side. So it is a usage-based type thing. So we had some claims and things, and that really was a big driver in that.
So I'm going to share a couple things. Please note this is from a cautionary place because of privacy rights. But hypothetically, we have someone who is 45 years old and they fall and they get hurt. And a medical doctor decides, based on what they're seeing for conditions, that that person is unable to work for the rest of their life. Potentially. Or a claim can be made to negotiate a settlement so that you're not responsible for their compensation for the rest of their years before retirement age. So we have a insurance provider that helps us with negotiating these kinds of claims, but there's also just people missing work for different pieces that are protected by workman's comp. And we're also worried about PFML, but that's a different piece. Bill, go ahead.
But, and again, as I said, it's a negotiated thing, and then that's what you get for your rates. But just for kind of a historical context, last year we actually went down in workers' comp. So this is a year that's not as favorable, and obviously we're going up quite a bit.
Anything to do with workplace injury, obviously we're working hard at and trying to make sure people are safe and stay safe. We know we have some tough kiddos too that are causing injuries at times, and those are those things that add up.
I'm going to ask again about that, and stop me if you think we'll talk about that later, but I know it's not really an article kind of issue, but is there any advantage to, it says that we're self-insured. Is there any advantage or better consistency if we move to not being self-insured, but joining one of just a regular insurance plan?
So Adam's going to make his way up. He's going to talk about it. We have been talking about it as well.
My turn for some mic time, I guess. So just to lay out the basics a bit more, we are part of the city as a self-insured workers' comp pool, if you will. And so it's been that way for many years. Part of the reason it's going up is not just the usage, but whatever the actuary says, you should have this in the pool to be adequately self-insured. There are these national rates that we have to use and apply those against our actual payroll. And those rates went up substantially after actually decreasing a year ago. And so I spoke with the city finance director, and we were both sort of had our jaws on the desk, but the rates are what they are. So to answer the question of could we be better off joining some sort of collective, we're looking into that. We're actively looking into it. There's, just as an example, there's a trust that's for public school departments in Maine. And we've started the process of reaching out to them just to see what that might look like. So we may do better, we may not, but we're going to have that information. So yes, something we should and are looking into.
Just one final word on that. I mean, it might, at least from where I'm sitting, even if it was a little bit more expensive on average, having a little more consistency year to year might be an advantage from at least my seat.
100%, that would be a big advantage
Yeah.
of making a move like that.
Thank you. Any questions or topics people want to talk about now? You have more?
I just want to add to that piece too, that there are layers of governance in our community, and you all are in charge of the school committee, the school budget, the school policy. And sometimes there's a pairing with city that makes good sense financially. And then there's other times where it feels like to one entity or the other that this might not make the most sense. But I would say the city staff have been good partners with bouncing ideas off each other and what else might work. So I don't want to create an atmosphere of, one entity versus another, but we also want to be good stewards of the resources that we have, knowing that we want more, but that's not real for any community to just keep asking for too much more. So that's what I had for just an overview tonight. Certainly Wednesday will be more detail, and I'm happy to bring back that list of positions with more detail, obviously. Other items that you'd like to see Wednesday night outside of what I might already be planning to do with cost driver articles?
Member Irwin?
Thank you. So I was just noticing Article 4, I think, is on the, is it next week or Wednesday? Sorry,
4 is next week.
next week? Oh, yeah. No,
On the
Wednesday.
most recent schedule, it's
Yep.
for Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay. So my question, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to double check that schedule because we initially were going to do some of those items tonight, but where we had other items, we pushed. So I can get you an updated schedule before is looking at, okay, on here.
Yes. Yes, still. Okay. So my question is,
So we should-
I would like to know some of our, I think only maybe hockey is a co-op, or I don't know technically is that what they call it? A co-op if it's multiple different districts that are participating?
Yeah, we do have some others, but
Okay,
there's
so-
not that many.
Okay, those, that would fall under Article 4, I'm guessing, other expenditures. So my question is for those, that we have co-ops for, are we taking the cost for, like, let's say rink time or fields or, you know what I mean? Or is that split between the districts that participate in the co-op? You don't have to answer that right now, but I just have a question about, like, who's responsible for paying for those types of things, whether it's transportation, field practice, uniforms, like those types of things.
Yeah, I'll get detail and bring that back.
Member Harper?
Thanks. I know we're probably not going over this budget detail, 65-page document, but there was a couple of things that stood out, but one that feels like, and we're talking about cost drivers, there's state of Maine billing fees, which seem to have skyrocketed from 35,000 in the past 3 years to 200,000 this requested.
I'm looking to that's EDMS, right? Yeah, so that's EDMS is when we do our main care billing, we work with EDMS who charges us 11% of what is submitted. We need their help because it's a big lift to submit all, and they know where it goes and how to organize it. We don't have the staffing for that, but they do pull 11% as their cost to do that contracted work. The reason it goes up is we're increasing our revenue from main care billing. So the more kids that we're providing services in-house, if we're providing the services holistically, we can then bill the state for them under different sections. Kirsten can talk more about that. But when we do that billing piece, so if we go from 1 million to 200, say 500,000 to 1 million. I don't want to throw a number out that's way bigger than, but if we go from 500,000 to 1 million, we're paying 11% of the million now instead of the 500,000. Where it lands in revenue though, is we have more main care revenue coming in, which offsets that cost. That said, we've asked the state a lot of clarifying questions about how could we maybe do this regionally, because every school district is finding a way to get that main care billing submitted. Hold on.
Yeah, if you could come to the podium.
Oh, do you want me to just say it? There's There's some audit protections as well, which are important.
It also prevents us from being audited. So they double check everything for ours. So I've learned lately it's a very good thing to have that. So if anything to go, they would be the ones that would take the responsibility for it because they're double checking it. So going from when I first started $150,000 we were billing to 1.5 million, that's the increase. So I could.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification. I guess, yeah, I'm just curious, like, why all of a sudden I mean, it sounds like it's a good thing to get more services for students. I don't know exactly the main care, like what those services equate to, but it's just interesting, like that this next year we would be like doing so much more. Well, we had to do it really slowly too, because you can be audited if you just start like and go, and the client program, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but it's a one-to-one service for the BHPs. In order for it to be cost efficient for the district, we had to bill because it cost a lot to run, so.
And so when we talk about the growth year over year, 3 years ago, we started talking about what could we bring internally to deflect costs, especially with like CDS kids that are coming in that have high needs. So that's what this program has morphed into, is taking those kids at that very young age and to McMahon, into the program we call the Climb program. But that's where we do the main care billing. The first year we had one staff that was trying to chase all of this. We had to train our own staff to know what things to log, make sure it's accurate. And now we have a more robust system and familiarity, so we know how to do it. That's why you see that revenue piece going up. But to your question, it's a great question, because that EDMS piece also goes up.
Other comments? Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a comment. I'll keep it brief because there's a lot more I could talk about it. I'm sure I will later on in the process here. But just as we approach the process, just things to keep in mind. Two things really stand out to me. One is if there's any opportunity to request more money from Augusta or have them put more money into education funding, like if that bill has any fruition, we absolutely should do everything we can to advocate for that. You know, my first budget was the fiscal year 2018, I think, when I was originally in the school committee. And the next couple budgets after, one thing always stood out to me. It's we're not getting fair funding from the state. Lewiston and social service communities are essentially subsidizing wealthy coastal communities in the southern coast of the state, which they send most of the kids to private schools. They don't even have these local expenses. And just we're not getting enough money from the state, and the budget issues in Lewiston are not the city's problem. It's not by mismanagement. In fact, we have great management. You guys, many people in the room perform magic. It's like literal alchemy with almost nothing. You guys do incredible work. So that does need to be appreciated. But just overall, like the messaging component, I think is extremely important, that we're not getting the funding that we need. You know, whenever I see a state level politician talk about funding 55% of education, 55% of what? You know, Lewiston should be funded at 90% based on all the requirements that they're giving us. It's things that we're legally required to do that cost a lot of money. They're the right thing to do and we do them. We're also by law required to, and they don't give enough money to do that. And local taxpayers have to pay the rest of it. So that's basically it right there. So if there's one message I can get across to the public, the budget is high not because of any mismanagement, not because we're deciding to just spend willy-nilly on random things. It's because we're required to spend on certain things. And even after the budget amount that it is, we're still a bare budget. This isn't us deciding like if we're going to cut back on like food, rations, or whatever. We have no rations. We're chopping off a foot at this point with this budget. We're chopping off body parts. So I really want the public to understand like that we're in dire straits here, and we have been for the last 10 years since I've been doing these budgets. They just get worse and worse every year, and something's got to change here. And I did literally say that like 8-9 years ago, something's got to change, and I'm still saying it. And the other thing too is just on our part, it's going to be really important for us to communicate kind of what I said with the public itself, making sure they understand all the cost drivers, looking at, the percentages, us being really like the communicators with the public about that, talking to our constituents. And I know I'm the at-large representative, so I want to kind of do like some citywide outreach. So finding a way that we can incorporate like the communication process into like the budget process itself, I think is extremely important. So know yourself as chairperson, you're the communicator. So if delegating that certain responsibilities go for, if you yourself have any ideas about reaching out to the public to communicate with that, I'm all ears. But just as we go forward, I don't want us to just spend the time of like deciding what the budget is and then hoping the public passes it and maybe working on the campaign to approve. But I just want to make sure that communication piece is being done as well, because there's so much good that's done in this district and there's so much help that we need, and we got to fight for it.
Thank you. We'll go down the line here. So Member Eames.
I don't know if you can speak to this, but how was it today in Augusta when you were we were talking about EPS and possible changes in exactly the way Luke was describing.
I mean, I can say just in general context, I ended up submitting testimony in writing. It was mayhem up there. There's a lot of people. A lot of people signed up and submitted testimony. Whenever you mess with details within the funding formula, it creates this perception of winners and losers. And so I think as that progresses, I think as I look at it, obviously, as Lewiston superintendent, I want those resources here. But I think you'll have other communities and politics looking to not make this adjustment because it will result in a loss of funding to other communities that don't have those same economic driver factors or the transportation factors or the special ed costs. I will just say out loud for people listening, the proposed language would increase the ratio, as I mentioned earlier, for economically disadvantaged kids from 0.15 to 0.38. There was additional cost components in there. This is less reflective or less important to us, but some communities, the transportation shifted the funding formula in and around COVID because they weren't moving kids every day. And so there was an actual adjustment. And now, so my understanding from others is that this is an attempt to put that back. They've been operating at too low of a subsidy. Again, we contract, so it's different for us. So I would defer to someone else on that detail. The other one that has me really curious is the special education piece, where they are looking at a limitation, or I shouldn't say limitation. There's a factor for 15% of your kids having an IEP. That's how the base model of special ed funding happens. They just say 15%. They want to shift that to 17%. So if your district has a higher number than 15% of kids who have an IEP, it would increase your funding. The problem that creates, or has created over time for Lewiston, is we have more than 50% of our kids that have an IEP. And the idea that you can set a number on a community or as a state to say that 16th and 17% in the current subsidy, they don't count in the funding formula to an extent. There's some modifiers, but it's always been interesting to me that when we get audited, they say you have too many kids with IEPs. Well, we've done the testing, we have the meetings. These are team decisions that are based in law and process, and you don't get to just pick and choose. And so some of that funding could shift, but it's unclear how it will shift when they move it from 15% to 17%, because they're also removing high cost adjustments. So if you go from 15 to 17 and you don't need the high cost adjustment, it could be beneficial to local funding. But if you have a high demographic of people with the high cost adjustment, which we do, it could be like a moot point or a net loss. So it's not just about more funding. I think this legislation is about a better model, and it's a step. So we did share our thoughts.
Member Harper.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that detail. I really appreciate what Member Jensen shared. I definitely want to back that up about just appreciating how much this school district manages to do with so little. And also to say that, I think we absolutely need more funding from the state. We are a service center. We have an extremely high needs population. And we are also helping to meet some of the state's housing goals, like building new housing here. Yeah, there just should be a lot of different factors at play, getting some more support for Lewiston residents, particularly when you look at the income of Lewiston. Like, we're also not a wealthy community. And I was wondering for a future budget agenda if we could talk about, I know it's maybe hard, but just talking about what is the state average of spending per student, so that we can use that also, because, if we are underspending per student on the state average, that is also crazy because of the high level of need that we have. So, yeah.
Member Hawkins.
I just want to say it's kind of off topic, but I very much appreciated in your memo the graphs and charts. Visual aids for people that struggle with numbers are a huge help. I think I said this years ago. A lot of people, when they hear about the city budget and the school budget, it's just a bunch of numbers that some of them make sense and most of them don't. But having a pie chart that lays out very clearly, most of our budget comes from state spending. You're actually only chipping in this bit. that can make things much, much clearer and make it much, much easier for people to get behind when we say we're really lower than we need to be, because then they can see it. It's not just a whole bunch of numbers in a spreadsheet that they may not know how to understand. So I really very much appreciated that memo. And I'm probably going to print out copies and hand to people I work with because anyway.
Thank you. Any other comments right now? Okay, Counselor Harriman.
Thank you. Yeah, just going back to that, that bill that we mentioned earlier, LD 2226, I went and I sat in on the public hearing this morning, or at least part of it. And it does, as the superintendent mentioned, there would be some districts that would lose funding. There was a suggestion that they change the bill a little bit so that basically they would stay flat until it got to the point where they would start growing again, just so they don't lose money over a fiscal year. I think they said it would be about $5 million total over about 30 districts. So not a huge amount of money, but still impactful. A lot of superintendents were there and spoke in favor. And I think it would impact us favorably, probably. Some of the things that they didn't have modeled yet, though, could change. They didn't have the transportation and the special ed changes modeled yet from the Department of Ed. So they said maybe 1 to 2 weeks for those models to come out. But I think overall it still would benefit us. I was talking with a representative from Biddeford, and it sounds like they would especially benefit because they have the disconnect between high property values and high poverty. I don't know that we have the high property values here in Lewiston, but we definitely have the high poverty. But it does sound like a bill that has a lot of support. There was at least one superintendent from a wealthier district that spoke against it. Because they would lose some funding. But again, there could be that option to basically keep them flat until they start growing again.
Thank you. And also just for the record, Member Hurd did have to get to a prior commitment, so that's why she had to leave. Any other comments at the time? Okay. Yeah, just a couple things I'd say on the communications piece and on the memo. Last year, I remember you prepared something that did some visual breakdowns of the articles and the different cost makeups of the budget. And I think that was very helpful. Similar to what Member Hawkins was saying, I think that helps present the information in a different way that I think more people can appreciate. And, just back up the view of what actually makes up the budget and where the money is actually going. And I think having those resources available then makes it easier for all of us to get the word out in different ways. I carried that around when I was knocking on doors last year. And actually that is something, thinking of different ways that we all can engage. I know last year I knocked on, I think 100 doors the Saturday before the vote. Then it passed by 14 votes. So I don't know if I had anything to do with it, but it's such a low turnout election, unfortunately. I think everything that we can do to try to get the word out and get people out voting, obviously I hope we'll get to a point where I want people to go vote for the budget, but if nothing else, just getting higher turnout so that people are voting on it one way or the other, I think that would be a big improvement. So that's all I'll add for now. Anything else that you wanted to say, Superintendent?
That's it for now as far as the overview.
Yes.
Thank you. You just brought up the vote again, and I'll probably mention it at each of these meetings, but Superintendent mentioned that absentee ballots will be available just a shorter window. I know it's hard for a lot of people to prioritize getting out on a Tuesday in May for this. There will also be in-person absentee voting at City Hall available the Wednesday and the Thursday before the vote. So I think the hours are 7:45 a.m. to 4 p.m. where you can go to City Hall and get that done as well.
Thank you. Yes, that is a good reminder. Okay, so more to come on this on Wednesday. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Okay. Is that right? So Wednesdays is at Connors, is that correct? Usually that is the case. Let's just double check.
So yes, we have this Wednesday at Connors. I don't know that it's all though, but it may be. Yes. Yeah. It's Wednesdays. Yeah, Wednesdays at Connors.
All right, thank you. Okay. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by member Bowden, seconded by member Jensen. We can just do this by a show of hands. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.